This is the one. It's coming back for Jonny Wilkinson. He drops the World Cup glory. It's over. He's done it. Jonny Wilkinson is England's hero yet again.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I don't know about you, but I can't watch that last clip without getting goosebumps. I remember exactly where I was at the Walkabout Bar on Upper Street in North London at far too early in the morning, having drunk far too much, then in a flood of tears on the pavement outside. Never felt so happy, never felt so delirious, and I was fast asleep in bed by about 11 o'clock. It was perfect. Really thrilled that you could join us here for something a little bit special at England Rugby House. It's been an amazing World Cup, but tonight we have something that I know that all of you are going to be thrilled to be a part of, but joined by somebody who I think at different parts of our rugby career as fans of England Rugby, we've cheered along on the touchline, we've cheered along in the stands, a man who is adored across rugby globally, a man who many of us, I'm sure, would be very happy to have children with at some point in our life as well. Still now. He's obviously won domestic titles in France here, of course, and back in England. He has won national cups, he's won European cups, 4-time Six Nations winner, 1 Grand Slam, and of course that remarkable World Cup win as well. He is quite simply one of the greatest rugby players to ever play the game, and undoubtedly perhaps the all-time greatest England player to pull on the red rose and wear the shirt with such pride. Please put your hands together for the one and only Jonny Wilkinson. Jonny, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks very much, everyone. Wow, thank you.
It's does that happen most of the time? Like you walk into a cafe, people stand up and applaud. I'd imagine it gets a bit boring.
I am so fortunate to have had so much support in my career, but also to have a fairly generic face, which means that when I go places, it doesn't happen very much. I sort of have the best of both worlds. I get to engage with people, and the support's amazing. But at the same time, I don't get recognised very much either. And if I do, I don't think people are that bothered where I live.
Well, look, this lot here certainly recognise you, and it's a thrill to be able to share an evening with you, a little insight, get to know you a little bit, to talk through some of those moments in your career, and also understand a bit about how you've become the person you are today. I mean, I read out a few of those things, and I'm not sure you look back very much and consider what you've achieved, because it's not necessarily what you're about, but domestic titles in the UK and in France, national cups, European cups, Six Nations, Grand Slams, World Cups. Does that sort of make sense to you with regards to the journey you've been on, or are you in a completely different place now, so you look at those accolades in a different way?
There's no doubt that they're amazing experiences, and like a lot of people say, I think the thing that lasts with you more than anything is the bonds you make, the people you come across, the connections you leave with. At that time, it was only ever about following a passion and fully expressing yourself. And that's what I'm doing now. And when I was playing rugby for England in those days and fully expressing myself, I wasn't looking back at my childhood. I was too busy doing that. And now I'm too busy following my passion. And the good thing is that it leads me into rugby and people, and in amazing ways I get to connect and experience essentially the feeling that I'm still playing rugby, but just with a different shirt on. I'm still part of a team, I still have an amazing life, and it feels just like that, but it's moving into different areas, which is why I don't look back that much. But it makes sense, of course, when you're there, it makes sense that you kick, I don't know, perhaps somewhere in the realm of 50 to 100,000 drop goals in practice, and you spend your time with your brother in your back garden constantly saying, and it's to Jonny, last seconds, he's going to kick it. And then you turn up and it's there, and you wonder, how the hell does that turn into that? But it's the power of the passion and the sense of the purpose and the intensity, and you realize that something won't let you go. Something needs to happen. And you look back at all those decisions you make when you get injured and you come back, or when you find yourself kicking on a rainy morning, and you think to yourself, I'm at the ground and I've got the bags and the balls in the back of my car, and I've arrived before I even made the decision to go kicking. I'm already there. Something in me is driving me, and I fought it for a long time. But when I look back now, I feel like it had something to express, and I was along for the beautiful ride. But it doesn't solve anything. Winning World Cups, winning those domestic titles, it doesn't mean I get to live worry-free. It doesn't mean I sort of have the answer to feeling great about myself all the time. And I think that's what my passion is now, is the bigger game that's behind things like performance. It's behind things like team spirit and all those amazing things we experience. But my passion has almost taken rugby and said, thanks, but now I want to go to the bigger game. I want to find out even more about life.
I want to go back, Jonny, because we saw some lovely clips of you as a youngster playing rugby to try and understand a little bit about where your drive came from. Was it always going to be rugby, the sport that you were going to play? Because you weren't a bad cricketer, were you? And someone once said basketball was...
Yeah, cricket, tennis, anything with a ball in it, that was what I was drawn to. There was something about ball sports, and I speak probably quite intensely about this now because it's part of my exploration has led me to understand that for a large part of my life, ball sports has been my way of expressing who I am. And that's not just that, oh, it's fun. It's saved my life in many ways. It's that serious. And now I use it as a way of expanding my, kind of, I guess, connection with life. As I do a lot of my almost meditation through ball sports. I'll go and shoot basketballs for hours. And the way I kicked balls, that was my meditation. So yeah, I was always interested in those sports, but rugby had something specific for me. But there was another part of my life. I had this one side of me which was pure passion, expression. I had an understanding when I had a ball in my hand of, I just knew how to do something with it. It made sense, I was clear in that way. But then there's another part of my life where I grew up with an immense sense of almost terror, doom the whole time about something going on, something underneath everything which was desperately trying to get out, and I had to keep it down. And my way of keeping it down, my understanding as a young kid was, as I listened to various early understanding of religious and everything, it was like, I have to be perfect. And because my passion was in sport, I then suddenly went into sport. What's perfection in sport? Winning, being the best, being spotless, having the perfect reputation. So suddenly these things just sort of, I guess, seeped into my way of seeing sport. So I had this passion that wanted to just let myself go, but then I had this other thing that was saying it has to be perfect. And that became my battle for the entire of my career. And once rugby dropped off, it's continued to be my battle, if you like. But now it's not played out in front of so many people. Like I said, I was supposed to experience what I was supposed to experience and learn what I had to learn. But there's something bigger than me. My personal journey is facing what was underneath that, but rugby was a beautiful vehicle for taking it so far. But it was always about those two things, passion and ultimately fear. I started to want to win a World Cup when the first World Cup was on. So when I was 3, there was no such thing as a World Cup. But in 1987, the first World Cup happened when I was about 7 or 8. And I immediately started writing down all these things like, need to win a World Cup, need to be the England captain, need to be the kicker, need to do this, need to do that.
And that's at 7?
At 7, I was obsessed, really, really full on. The teacher thing was actually, I went to a careers meeting and said, I'm going to play rugby. What do you want to do? I'm going to play rugby. And the game wasn't professional, so the teacher said, well, that's not going to happen. You're going to need a job. And so I said, all right. 2 weeks later, the game turned professional. So I went back in, I was like, I'm all right, don't worry. You can shove your job, sort of thing. But joking aside, this is what I mean about the path. It was amazing. The careers officers said that. 2 weeks later, the game went professional. The next term, the scrum half, Steve Bates, who was the scrum half partner to the fly half, Rob Andrew, who was my all-time hero at that time, comes and starts teaching at the school and starts coaching the rugby team. Well, I'm in the rugby team. And then Rob Andrew gets employed to go to Newcastle, where the game's been, they've got this brand new professional team and they're buying this incredible team. Rob Andrew says to Steve Bates, I want you to come and coach. Steve Bates says to me, I want you to come and play. And you're like, oh, right, there's your path. Now I was thinking, I need to go and started at a club and get into a university and play, but suddenly just that sheer passion and purpose is suddenly you're there behind the guy you've admired for so long, in a team full of these amazing people. So I had that kind of same intensity, but I think with intensity, if you open up to it, it does a lot of work on its own. What can get in the way of that intensity was what I often did, which was the constant trying to control stuff. Because while I was busy controlling, life in its way was helping me. I just wasn't aware of it.
Do you? It's interesting because it sort of almost talks about that. You talk about that you having this bigger purpose that was driving you in a way that you couldn't necessarily control. It was just happening. The fact that those elements fell into place in such a serendipitous way. I mean, you look back at that now, and I mean, it feels like it was fated.
Bizarre. The World Cup final, I know we talked about that before, but for that to go to the final seconds and for it to be a drop goal, and it doesn't make any sense. It's just such a powerful thing. But like I said, the hanging on to that is what actually takes away this special nature of it. Being able just to walk away has been such a big thing for me. A powerful, the trust, that sort of fear that I grew up with has always represented in distrust, a lack of trust, and it cost me dearly in my England career, massively. Because
what didn't you trust?
My distrust would go into anything. Teammates, media, anything and everything. The ball, the referee, just anything I could find. It would. How
would it manifest itself then?
Just sheer anxiety,
right.
Panic, in every way. But so
what? That your teammates weren't taking things seriously enough. That the referee wasn't.
Just that it wasn't. It wasn't as I would never have a personal judgment of teammates, but the general sense was, and this is where I took on 3 sort of essential personalities or archetypes. One was trying to be the savior, because I had so little distrust, I had so little trust, I felt like I had to go and save everything. The other one was the martyr, in that I'd do all the hard things and get hit, and I wouldn't want any compliments. And the third one was the warrior. I had to fight. So those 3 things, that's when I had those things going on, I felt a bit like me. But what it meant was, when I was with that first England team, I was 18 when I joined that team, and they're all 30 plus. And as a result, the balance was just about right. To have all these guys that I admired and whatever and respected, they looked after everything. So that just about gave me enough trust to go and be me within that bubble that they prepared for me. It's why on a recent documentary, I'm with a few of them. One of the things I said was, I feel like I'm just surrounded by my dad here, because they were all essentially that role. They just kind of looked after me, made sure, like Martin Johnson would put an arm around me before the game, and he didn't realize what that meant. But for me, that was kind of like, you're safe here. You can go and be you. But when his arm went and he retired, when the likes of Neil Back and Jason Robinson or all these guys, you could name any of them in the 4-pack as well, Matt Dawson, Kieran Bracken, they all left. That arm left, and suddenly I'm the guy that's supposed to be telling these other guys that, don't worry, you're okay, you're safe with me. I didn't know what safe was.
So and you didn't feel capable, you didn't feel like you had the experience.
So I was running around as a captain on that field, trying to do everything. I was preparing during the week. I was kicking 2 hours a day at least, because my trust was, I need to see the ball go through 100 times in order to be able to move on to tomorrow. But as soon as I left the field, my mind was like, oh, I'm not sure. So people are like, you're so dedicated. I'm like, I wasn't dedicated, I was just terrified. The dedication for me, the courage for me would have been to face that distrust, to have a kicking session where it's not quite there, but to go in anyway and sit in it and trust that, what happens is when that whistle goes, I come out. I never trusted my gift. Almost like I tried to take over my gift and do it for my gift. Thankfully, for the most part of my career, when the whistle went, everything drops off. You always hear people say, when the whistle goes, everything's fine. Because the gift in you comes out, the reason you're there comes out. But after a while, it was so strong, my desire to control and my fear, that maybe sort of I got injured for 3 years, 4 years, which didn't help. But when I came back, it didn't help at all. But when I came back, that was going with me on the field. So I wasn't getting that freedom. I wasn't getting that liberation that would normally happen. Suffer in the changing room, whistle goes, oh, what's the problem? Bang, everything's awesome, you're in the zone. I got less and less of the zone, so I went more and more on the preparation, less and less zone, and by the end of it, like I said, I broke down for 4 years. And it took that move to France for me to question any of it. And after then, like I said, I've suddenly been like, sheesh, maybe I should keep questioning it, because every time I do, I find out something miraculous.
You mentioned that debut you made. You're 18 when you made your England debut. Take us back to that squad that you sort of became a part of. Because I read somewhere, and I don't know if this is true, but Jerry Guscott famously turned around, saw you in the changing room and thought you'd won a competition to spend the day with the England team. Because you were so young, and he was looking around going, well, that's nice, there's a competition winner over there. And then suddenly you're coming on, I think you played on the wing or something.
I mean, the story has some truths to it.
Never let the truth get in the way of a good story.
No.
Come on.
The major bit being that Jerry Guscott knew who I was, but still made the comment about the competition. But yeah, I wandered into that team, likes of Tim Rodber, Martin Johnson, Jerry Guscott, Underwood, just Phil de Glanville. I played against Will Carling, not with, but played against Will Carling. Yeah, so I was in that Jason Leonard, obviously, who played a long time with me, but what a changing room to suddenly be part of. As an 18-year-old, I'd only just, essentially, I'd left school about, 6 months before. It didn't make any sense. So being in the worst part would be being in a lift with them, because you're going to your room and you're in a lift. And the thing is, I was a boring 18-year-old, so I had nothing to say about anything. So I'm stood there thinking, and Tim Rodber and Ben Clark are stood there like huge people, and you're sort of just wishing the lift journey would hurry up, just like. But I didn't know what to say. I didn't know. I had no way of. I'm an introvert by nature. I'm shy. So one of the things that Clive Woodward made a point of was saying to me, "You need to present meetings." Even at 18 years old, he's saying, "I want you to present this meeting." This would keep me up at night. I was terrified, but he knew that as an introvert in that position, I had to learn those skills. But that team was intimidating to the extent, and this is not any sort of judgment upon them, but because of that dynamic, I would, with my kicking coach, Dave Orrid, I'd stay at Twickenham. One, because to have Twickenham all to yourself under the lights as an 18-year-old kid is the best feeling.
Of course.
Best feeling. So, but I'd stay there for hours. My kicking coach was like, Jesus, my legs are killing me. Can we go? But I would time it so that I could go into dinner late, so there'd be no one in there. That's how I lived that part of my career. I would go into dinner late with no one around. I'd go back to my room. This is what I mean about that fear.
Yeah.
That's how I lived it. But the experience of playing for England was brilliant. But in between, you think, what are those players up to? Oh, I bet it's awesome. They're just doing this and going out and like getting noticed. For me, I was eating in empty dinner halls. I didn't know which table to sit on. I'd be riding in silent, awkward lifts and then going to Twickenham. And
it's lonely.
That's. I look at it now and it's like it couldn't have been any different. I couldn't have done it any different. But like I said, you said before, it's amazing how these things pan out. But what a team, We went to that World Cup '99. We lost that Grand Slam '99. But that team was worthy of of a lot of things, and it was a real bedrock for what happened 4 or 5 years later.
I want to start talking about 2003, of course. I think you've touched on this already, but 2003 was the culmination of the World Cup before and the run-up to that. How did your personal game develop over those 4 years from the previous World Cup up until when you got to Australia?
Again, something people may or may not recognise about me was when I was 18, all I ever did was run the ball. So all I wanted to do was run, pass, and just smash people in tackles. But I had to learn quite quickly that you couldn't, that wasn't how it worked at international levels. Clive Woodward was a big part of that. Rob Andrew was a big part of that. Newcastle, sort of saying you've got to learn how to manage a game. And so really pushed that. So over those 4 years, I started to learn and understand the importance of getting the ball into the other opposition half. I understood the power of kind of just momentum shifts in game and trying to see a bigger picture than just what was happening around me. But my whole life was built around running with the ball and basically just physical exertion, just getting it out there, physical expression. And also in the middle of that was drop goals.
Yeah.
So Clive was constantly saying, I want you to hit drop goals. I want you to hit drop goals. And I was so resistant. I was like, oh, I don't like it. It's a bit like New Zealand. I do feel like New Zealand has got a bit of a thing against drop goals because they can attack from anywhere and score. And that was my feeling. It was almost like a kind of, but isn't that admitting that we can't go and score? And it was all this game management stuff. But I was thinking, oh, I don't know. And if I take one and miss it, oh, it felt wrong. But then in South Africa in the year 2000, it was just enough on my mind for me to stop in the middle of a game, quite close to the post, and go, oh gosh, I could hit one here. And I was basically doing it for him. I wasn't even bothered about the game. I was like, well, he wants me to do one, so I've done one, maybe that'll shut him up. But
he still talks about it now,
he loves
doesn't
it
he?
now, doesn't he? Yeah, he still talks about it. But what happened was, what it started to fester in me was this understanding that I wanted to just be the savior of a team. Now, as one person, you can't run through everyone unless you're Jason Robinson, basically.
Yeah.
And we're not all Jason Robinson. But you can do so much, but that's a bit of a long shot. Tackling, I would do as much as I could, but there's only so much you can do. But with a drop goal, anytime you want, you can score 3 points. No one can touch you. And so this started to gather on me to be like, this is interesting. It played on that idea that I could really have a huge impact. I could be that warrior. I could be that savior, whatever. And so it started to become an interesting tactic for me, just to say, well, what are you going to do about it? To other teams, sort of like, oh, well, there you go. Oh, here's another one. And when you miss, I started to feel less ashamed about missing. Because for me, a miss was a kind of failure, and oh my gosh, the guys are looking at me, what are they thinking? But I just started to feel more powerful about getting one than I did about missing. So games started to appear where I'd hit 2 drop goals here, 1 drop goal here, and I'd have a crack from here. And when they were flying, I know what it's like to be on the end of that, because that World Cup 1999, Yanni de Beer hit 5.
Yep.
Oh, it's never been anything so painful.
It was relentless, wasn't it?
It's painful to think, you're not that good a team compared to us. We can beat you, but what can we do about this guy? And I think that things like that started to form in my head, and as a result, I probably weighed more heavily on that than I did on other things. Blackie at Newcastle kept me running, kept me stepping, and I really wanted to still do my best in the game that way and really change the attacking shape of the game. But there was something about just being able to sit there against an opposition and just knock it over. And it also helped a little bit a bit later in my career, when you sensed that we weren't as good as the opposition in many ways, that you were able, therefore, to just suddenly go, look, we can't get you there, we can't get you there, we can't get you there, but if we get in your half, this will do.
Yeah.
And teams got quite stressed about that. Suddenly they, like we did against South Africa, you're going, what do we do? What do we do? So suddenly you start running out of the line, you start coming offside, and suddenly your game goes.
It's a potent weapon when it's working, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, unfortunately, they can go dramatically wrong along the way as well, though, can't they? And that's when, I mean, we've all seen fly halves go for, or not just fly halves, but players go for drop goals and they screw off for a line out.
Yeah, that's a particularally bad one, that is. Yeah.
If you catch it particularly wrongly. That build up to the final, though, obviously you're in Australia. I think much like our sporting press or our press, the Australian sporting press is sort of quite voracious when it comes to building up tension and the claustrophobic nature of that. Do you remember the build up to the final and how intense that was? There was one journalist had a Johnny Voodoo doll or something like that. I mean, much like they would build you up to be the boy wonder, they will try and do whatever they can to psychologically impress something upon you. Yeah,
it's interesting, the media in the Southern Hemisphere, especially in New Zealand and Australia, tend to focus more on how they can help their team with trying to create those kind of environments, whereas sometimes our media tends to help the opposition. But I remember coming out of one interview, and the interviews were getting a bit, because I was just shutting myself more and more away. I had to do a photo. I was writing a column for the Times at the time, and I had to do a photo to go with it. And they were so keen that I go and do it at a beach. It's the week before the final, and for me, honestly, it's like I couldn't. It's like a vampire going out in the daylight. I couldn't bear it, and yet they said, "No, we've got to do it." So I literally went undercover in a minivan, sprinted out onto the beach, sat down for 2 seconds, took a photo, jumped in the back. This is the way I was living. And people caught on to that. So a lot of the interviews were starting to become about the mental state. What's going on? How are you handling this? So I got through one of these interviews, trying to be perfect, trying to get all the right things said, all this same stuff that was rolling around in me. And I was so lost in it that this guy came over and just said, "Oh, yeah, well done," in the middle of a press conference, and shook my hand. I was like, yeah, fine. And as he shook my hand, someone took a photo of it. And he had a T-shirt on that had a circle on it with a picture of me in it with a line going through it, saying something like, it was something about me on it, to do with kicking or getting rid of me or whatever it was. And I was sort of like, then maybe that's when it kicked in. I'm like, geez, this is pretty serious. Do you know what I mean? This is the same thing happened in 2007 when we beat Australia in the quarterfinal in Marseille. I felt amazing about that. The next day, New Zealand were playing France. We were obsessed with the fact convinced we were going to play New Zealand. But then France beat New Zealand. Yeah. Suddenly you're walking around in the French streets, mopeds going everywhere, horns being tooted. Suddenly it just felt like, oh my gosh, this is big. So that's when it really, I guess, kicked in, the sense of not hostility, but definitely that you're in someone else's nation and they're very much up against you. But New Zealand and Australia do have that. I mean, New Zealand were all over us when we won over there in 2003. Some of the comments we were getting there were, were it not for the fact they were quite funny, they would have been offensive. But they were mostly aimed at how old so much of our team was. But yeah, it was. It's funny how it works that way. But they are so pro rugby, especially New Zealand.
Yeah, of course, it's a religion, isn't it? I've watched the I watched the final back recently, and then I've watched the highlights before you coming out today. It's a fascinating match, that final, because in so many ways it just swings all over the show. And even though I can remember watching it and believing that we were good enough to win and we were going to win it, and I had trust, Jonny.
Oh, good for you.
Yeah.
It must feel so good for you.
It was amazing. It's amazing what a couple of pints at the walkabout bar at 9 o'clock in the morning will do. You should have tried that.
Good preparation, yeah, I should have done.
But, you watch it back and it's still edge of the seat stuff. It still feels like, oh my day. I mean, that could have gone the other way.
The most amazing thing was that final penalty goal that Flatley kicked. And funnily enough, Flatley wrote me a letter after the World Cup, just saying, just wanted to say, huge respect to you for what you did and how you handled it, and just to say that, don't worry, we'll get you next time, sort of thing. Which is really good of him. Lovely bloke. And he obviously, nerves of steel, because it's all very well for me. We were level, trying to take the lead.
Yeah.
He was behind, trying to get level. Now, if you miss when you're behind, it's game over. For me, I had at least the fact that, okay, you can have another chance. So for him to knock those dead like he did was incredible. But when he was taking his last penalty, I did get the sense that all the boys were under the post or near enough. And there wasn't this kind of, I hope he misses. There was more of a sense of, we want to win this rather than them sort of win it for us. We want to go and win it. So there was this incredible sense of acceptance that when it went over, there was no,
We've thrown it away.
What are we going to do now? It was literally just like one group of guys just went straight to, as they say, next job. My gosh, just like bang, en masse. Not a question of, all right, what do we, it's just we all knew. And from then on, the whole thing took that shape of a reduced version of what you mentioned as career long. How on earth does that happen? It's like, well, that small period there was exactly it. We went kick off long, they kicked it off. line out, Mike Catt took the ball up into an area where they knew he was coming. He got absolutely smashed, but did what he had to do. Matt Dawson made a break, amazing contribution, because at that point we were probably nearer where Owen Farrell was when he hit that drop goal against South Africa just recently. And that's not one you want to take in, if you don't have to. And so Matt Dawson made the break, and we made our way up to the thing, towards the 22. Martin Johnson took the ball up again from Neil back so that Matt Dawson get back on his feet, pass the ball, and then the ball gets passed to me. And then reduce that down even more to what's happening within me. I say this every time, and it's unfair, but I'll say it again. Matt Dawson passed me the ball, so I took it about here, just the back shoulder. That's where it normally was. But as I caught it, I switched out of doing it to watching it mode. So I'm watching the whole thing happen. But I can't feel myself doing it. I'm just watching it. Well, I can feel it, but I'm not there. And I see the ball drop, and I'm sort of thinking, yeah, it looks good. And then I see my leg coming in. I'm like, I know where this is going. And I just knew that whole trust had gone and been replaced by absolute knowing. So I've crossed time barriers now. It's no longer this, I hope it goes over, because I know it's over. In that moment there, I see my leg. I know as soon as I see the ball drop, I know how it's going to spin. I know where it's going. I see my leg. I feel it. I look up, and it's just as is. Pure creation. There's no trying to make something happen. It's been created. And I'm just watching. And that's when you say about, wow, isn't it amazing how things happen? That's the most, I guess, engaged or in the zone or dissolved experience I've had. And as the ball starts passing through the post, I come back in, which is why I sort of go disbelievingly, oh my, geez, it's gone over. Because I wasn't even there doing it. And then we get through the rest of the game, and I maintain that moment when Mike Catt kicks the ball off the field, the ball's on its way off, and I see the referee go to his pocket for his whistle. And I want to stop time there. I want to stop it before the ball's gone off, because it's the same as that kick. I don't want to, when the ball goes over, it wasn't as good as being in that experience. When the ball clears that line, it's not as good as being on the field. It's the knowing, that trust of knowing that everything is okay, but it not being okay yet. It's powerful. But when you cross that line, it's celebration, it's great, but it's less. And it's something about that moment, that engagement that I'm seeking in my life, that experience to connect with people. Because before that, supporters and everything was just another reason for me to be polite, be correct, be perfect, achieve, would be to, whereas now I seek that engagement, that connection with people, the same connection I had with that drop goal, the same connection I had with that team. But it's not in the outcome. It isn't in, it's when we win. It's not there. But it is in the knowing of the winning. It's in the knowing that you're good enough. And that's what I mean. That's what's been a beautiful balance for me, is having that drive. But I ran from it a lot of the time, instead of basically facing it and saying, look, I need to trust in this. And that moment, that drop goal then was just the ultimate losing yourself in what you love.
You described it in such a spiritual, fascinating way, Jonny. We're actually going to play the clip now, and I'm going to watch it this way for the first time. I've watched it a few times.
So will I, yeah.
I'll watch it in a very different way. This is the moment Jonny's just described, the drop goal.
Dawson goes through, makes a wonderful break. He's tackled 15 metres from the line. Backs there. Wilkinson will drop for goal. There's offside surely against England. No, Martin Johnson has it. He drives. There's 35 seconds to go. This is the one. It's coming back for Jonny Wilkinson. He drops for World Cup glory. It's over. He's done it. Jonny Wilkinson is England's hero yet again.
And there's so much in that. And I watched Dawes talking about it as well, and how he makes that break, which gets you further forward. And then Jono has the forethought to think, I can't be passing this ball to Jonny. I'll take the ball forward, so then Matt can be there. But also, I know you practice with your right foot, but that's the wrong foot. You are left-footed. I mean, if you'd have had a choice, would you have rather been on the other side of the field going with your left foot? Did that I mean, that didn't even enter it either.
No, it's going back to this. The higher intelligence of having something that needs doing in life was, I think, the reason of being in the garden at 4 years old, not 3, 4, and kicking the ball off my left foot, and then the thought comes through me. I wonder if I can do it on my right foot. Now, why does that thought come up? And why doesn't it just leave? Why does it stick? The next time it's like, okay, I wonder if I can do it even better on my right foot than my left foot. And now I'm off. But I didn't sit there and dedicate myself to working my right foot. The thought just came up in me. To the extent that then 20 years later, I'll be kicking balls around a field, or even 30 years later, before my final ever game in France, the league final. I'm at Stade de France the day before the game, kicking balls around the field, and I'll take a pass and I'll punt it right-footed. And then on the way back to take another pass, I'll pretend I'm my right foot and I'll start trash talking my left foot. Saying and then on my left foot, I'll hit one left-footed, and then I'll talk back to my right foot. So it's like this stuff's coming through me. And it's enjoyable. The same way with passing, hands. I've never been able to just accept you're left-handed or you're right-handed. I'm like, no, I'm not. I refuse to have that about me. So from the drop goal side of things, I would practice equal every time. And for a large part of my career, my right foot was better than my left.
Yeah.
And I think probably the drop goals I hit, half of them I would have thought, or even maybe just under, would be right-footed. To the extent that it just depends on where you are on the field. Because that side of the field, I take right foot, it means I'm further away from the defense, and I'm moving further away, and I have my shoulder to block them. If I take left foot, I'm actually moving towards the defense and pushing the ball towards them. So it just makes sense, but it also reduces the angle a bit. So the ball gets to me, and it's like, but people talk about muscle memory. But muscle memory is different to what I experienced. Muscle memory is something happening quite easily, and it makes sense. But to lose yourself in something was way beyond that. But for some reason, it's always just made sense. Why wouldn't you? Why not? Instead of, it's an effort to learn on that side. It's like, well, why wouldn't you?
Do you think you achieved that again in your career? That moment of sort of being on a sort of slightly different plane, out-of-body experience, watching something like that happen?
Yeah, not for as long. That happened over quite a long period. Even I know it didn't seem that long, but from when the ball goes down and leg swings, that's.
Oh no, in the pub that took forever. Trust me.
Definitely, yeah.
Especially the bit where we couldn't tell whether it was going over the post or not.
There were moments, definitely. But after that World Cup, the biggest change in my career happened in that I'd been burning the candle essentially at both ends in terms of physically and mentally. I'd been full on, and I broke down in every way, physically, mentally, emotionally, and especially body-wise. And for 4 years, I just dropped out. So if you imagine this big shift's coming where I'm going from being sheltered by a load of amazing teammates, and a lot of them are moving on, and the English rugby has chosen to, whatever's happening behind the scenes and coaches and whatever's moving on, it all moves on whilst I'm 4 years away from what I would love doing, and I'm struggling with that. And when I come back later, it's all different. And now I'm supposed to be the guy at the top. And that shift had a lot to say because I tried to mentally get my way back to where I was. And that's maybe where I accelerated the distrust in me. And as a result, those moments you're talking about became less and less.
Yeah.
Whereas definitely before that, I'd spontaneously combust in the middle of the game into some kind of activity and just be like, how the hell did I do that? But I started to play much more intellectually later on. Started to try and figure games out. But as you do that, you start to sit back a bit more. You become less effective.
Yeah.
So it took, for me, the problem was because injury-wise, I was a bit less physical, maybe able, but also because teams just used to be like, you sort it out. So I went to Toulon. It's like, oh, don't worry, we'll get into their half and he'll work it out. I was forced to, sort of almost try and look after everything, rather than actually feel like I can just go there and be me.
Yeah.
But there were moments, definitely, but they're always the ones that if you speak to any player, apart from the bond between players, the other thing that they always miss is coming up with stuff that you didn't know you knew how to do.
I've absolutely loved this excuse to be sitting alongside you. It's been a real privilege for me, I'm sure, for everybody here to have a little bit of an insight into you and your life. So thank you so much, as Mikey said, for being so open and so honest. Ladies and gentlemen, please, would be upstanding and show your appreciation for the legend that is Jonny Wilkinson.
Thanks, mate.
Okay.